The Carolina Panthers have a new head coach. His name is Dave Canales, formerly the offensive coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this was a pretty good hire for Carolina, considering the fact that you weren't going to be able to get any of the big names out there. Bill Belichick didn't even want to interview with you. You weren't going to get Mike Vrabel. And you definitely weren't going to get Jim Harbaugh. So the best that you could do was come away with Dave Canales, who did a really good job in his one season calling plays for the Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield went from an afterthought to putting himself in firm position to get a massive payday when free agency comes around. Dave Canales, he runs a quarterback-friendly system. He spent a lot of time with Seattle. As a matter of fact, he spent 10 years with the Seattle Seahawks. He was a big part of Geno Smith having that career season out of nowhere. He also had a little bit of an impact on Russell Wilson having success later on in his career with the Seattle Seahawks. And you look what he did with Baker Mayfield this season. It has to give you nothing but confidence about what he could potentially do for Bryce Young. Bryce Young, in my eyes, was a generational quarterback prospect. And the Bryce Young that we saw last year in Carolina was not the Bryce Young that I scouted when he was coming out of Alabama. And a large reason for that is because he had shit coaching. Frank Wright was one of the worst head coaching hires of all time based on how that thing transpired. He was Urban Meyer bad. And we remember how bad Trevor Lawrence was his rookie season when he was getting coached by Urban compared to how good he was in year 2 and so forth with Doug Peterson. Dave Canales, even if you're not a big fan of the hire because he doesn't really have a proven track record of being able to call plays and have success, this is still better and an upgrade from what you had last year with Frank Wright. Frank Wright took everything that was good about the Carolina Panthers from the previous season and made it worse. They couldn't run the football. They couldn't protect the quarterback. This offense was just non-functional. Dave Canales, he runs a QB-friendly system. He's going to find ways to get Bryce Young going early into his career. He can get him outside the pocket, utilize play action. He should be able to get the offensive line playing better. Tampa Bay's offensive line was pretty good when it came to pass blocking, but run blocking was not their specialty, and they didn't have any success running the football at all. But that wasn't really because of Dave Canales. That was mostly due to Tampa Bay just not having the horses up front to be able to have a sustainable run game. The Carolina Panthers are getting a better head coach who has a better understanding of how to get Bryce Young in situations to succeed as compared to Frank Wright. I know this dude is very young. Not too many people know about Dave Canales unless you're a Panthers fan. Then you will remember him when he was calling plays for Tampa Bay. And the big pushback that I saw against this is, oh, wow, how smart is it to hire an offensive coordinator that only scored 9 points against you? That isn't the point, people. You can't judge how good somebody is based on what they did when they were coaching up against you. Because the situation that the Buccaneers had this season, they weren't even supposed to make it to the playoffs, let alone have a winning record. They were expected to be taken for Caleb Williams. They were in cap hell. So Dave Canales was able to do the most with what he was given. To turn Baker Mayfield from being a journeyman quarterback into a serviceable starter in the span of 1 year is really impressive. And he did the same thing with Geno Smith. This dude has Midas touch when it comes to what he does with quarterbacks. And Bryce Young, you couldn't ask for a better head coach based on the list of candidates that the Carolina Panthers had a realistic shot at being able to hire. You weren't going to get a Jim Harbaugh or a Bill Belichick. We know David Tepper is not that good of an owner, and right now, he's starting to trend towards Dan Snyder territory. This is the best hire that the Panthers were going to get when it comes to finding a head coach that can find a way to get the most out of Bryce Young while specializing on the offensive side of the football. My big question is going to be, are they going to be able to keep defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero? That was the only good thing about Carolina last year was that defense. If they can keep him and they get some more wide receivers, improve the offensive line, hopefully Dave Canales not only can save Bryce Young's career, but he can figure out what the hell is going on with Akem Ekwonu. This is a A- hire, in my opinion, for the Carolina Panthers. You weren't going to get any of the elite targets out there. The best you were going to get was going to be this guy. And he had a really good one season calling plays for Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield was not that great until Dave Canales and Sean McVay got their hands on him. And when you have a guy who can do what Dave Canales did in Tampa with Baker Mayfield in a span of 1 year, you got a pretty solid football coach. Is he going to be able to win a lot of games? Is this going to translate into success? That would be to be decided. But if I had to give you a prediction early on of how I feel Dave Canales is going to pan out for Carolina, I think this could be a decent hire. Could he lead this franchise to a Super Bowl? I don't really know about that, but I do know that he knows what the hell he's doing offensively. When I listened to him in his offseason press conferences last year, he talked about how he wants to run an offense that isn't complicated for the players to learn. And his offense doesn't have all kinds of different plays and whatnot. They run similar plays out of different formations. And that's going to help a guy like Bryce Young better adjust to the NFL, with him having to once again learn a new system in his second season in the league. Dave Canales is going to tailor this offense to what Bryce Young does best. And that's what Bryce Young needs. This hiring process for Carolina was never about getting a big-time head coach. Nobody like a Jim Harbaugh or Bill Belichick was going to want to work with an owner this bad as David Tepper. He's throwing water on fans. You really think that Jim Harbaugh and Bill Belichick, two grown-ass adults, were going to want to coach for that? Come on, man. Some of y'all were being a little bit unrealistic with who you are actually going to be able to hire. This was a pretty good hire for the Carolina Panthers. You got a young up-and-coming offensive-minded coach who also got interviews elsewhere. It wasn't like this dude wasn't wanted, and I thought that he was probably going to go to Seattle. So, Bryce Young getting Dave Canales as his head coach for year 2 is a blessing in disguise from the football gods. I expect Bryce Young to have a big year 2 with Dave Canales being his head coach, man. Frank Wright was Urban Meyer bad. Everybody keeps making it seem like the Carolina Panthers made a horrible decision taking Bryce Young over C.J. Stroud. But C.J. Stroud, let me give you a news flash, he would have been dog shit too if he was playing for the Panthers. He may have been a little bit better than Bryce Young, but the team still would have sucked. If you got terrible coaching, you're not going to have that good of a team. They had no receivers that could separate, for crying out loud. Adam Thielen, at 33 years old, was their number one option. That's the problem. Dave Canales is going to do God's work with Bryce Young. And this job was not as unattractive as what people make it out to be. If you were to ask the majority of scouts and NFL executives out there who they would have selected number one, most people would have went with Bryce Young. This dude was sensational at Alabama. He's the best quarterback that Alabama and Nick Saban ever had. And there were so many people who were quick to flip the switch on Bryce Young when things started to go left, not giving this dude the benefit of a doubt that he's in a terrible situation with a terrible team around him. Dave Canales is at least going to be able to fix the bad play calling that Bryce Young was receiving. And if the Carolina Panthers can go out there in free agency, get a guy like T. Higgins, maybe hit on a couple of good receivers in this upcoming draft, which this is a really deep receiver class, and improve this offensive line, this is going to be a pretty serviceable football team next year that Dave Canales is going to have. This team isn't far away from being a playoff contender. Right now, their defense is pretty solid. A lot of their work this offseason has to go into that offensive line and the wide receiver room. They improve that. This instantly could be a team that wins 7 to 9 games year 1 under Dave Canales. But this is an incredible hire for a dude like Bryce Young, who was given Frank Wright, who at that point just completely lost all sense of what it took to be a successful head coach in the National Football League. Frank Wright didn't know what the hell he was doing last year, and it made a lot of sense why the Indianapolis Colts gave that dude the pink slip really early during his final season. They didn't even let this dude get to the mid-season. pretty much. Jim Irsay kicked his ass to the curb after the first couple of weeks of the season. He was like, you know what? I've seen enough of this. The Panthers, they made a bad hire with Frank Wright. You're going to have a chance to correct your mistake with Dave Canales. And if this dude ends up not working out, then not only are you going to be in the market for another head coach, but you're going to be in search for a new franchise quarterback also. This hire is going to have a big impact on how the trajectory of Bryce Young's career goes. But Bryce Young, if Dave Canales can end up bringing the best out of him like he did Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield, he's going to play at a top 10 level. CJ Stroud, how well he played this year was not that big of a surprise to me. Bryce Young should be able to have a great season in his own right, his second season. Both CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, I expected to be top 10 quarterbacks right out the gate as soon as they took their first snap of NFL action. CJ Stroud lived up to that because what he have? Great coaching. His offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick, he also has been in the running for a lot of head coaching jobs. You got D'Amico Ryans, a stud young head coach. The Panthers on the other end, they had an awful coaching staff. Outside of Ejiro Evero, they had a terrible team around Bryce Young. The Panthers gave the formula to how not to build around your young quarterback. Dave Canales should be able to make up for the sins that this organization committed when they drafted Bryce Young. This was a good hire in my book. Not a big name hire, not a flashy hire, but it's a good one. Dave Canales knows what he's doing. Once again, he was able to have Baker Mayfield playing the best football of his career and Geno Smith also. Dave Canales, I give this an A- hire considering how bad of an owner David Tepper has shown to be, at least up to this point. And with the situation that Dave Canales is going to be inheriting, it's not like this dude is inheriting a Super Bowl caliber roster. He's inheriting a quarterback that needs his footprint in order to succeed in the league. Because Bryce Young, his confidence, without a doubt, has to be shot from what transpired year one. So Dave Canales was the perfect hire for Carolina based on what they were going to be able to get. And also somebody who can come in and fix Bryce Young and have this dude playing up to the level that he should be as a former #1 overall pick.